What if talking about your daily habits in English could feel simple, natural, and automatic? Imagine waking up in the morning and being able to say exactly what you do every day without stopping, without translating in your head, and without feeling nervous. Many learners know vocabulary, and many understand grammar rules, but when it comes to speaking about their real life, their routines, and their habits, they suddenly feel stuck. They don't know if they should use the present simple, the present continuous, or some other tense. They hesitate, they overthink, and they lose confidence. But today, everything is going to change. In this episode, you will learn a clear, logical, and practical way to talk about your habits in English so you can speak more naturally every single day.
Yes, because habits are one of the most common topics in real conversations. When you meet someone new, they ask about your routines. When you talk to coworkers, you talk about your daily schedule. When you speak with friends, you talk about what you usually do, what you often eat, or what you never do. These small conversations are the foundation of real English communication. And the good news is this: you don't need complicated grammar or advanced vocabulary to talk about your habits. You just need a few simple structures and some very common words that native speakers use all the time. Once you understand these patterns, you'll notice that talking about your daily life becomes much easier and much more comfortable. Hello and welcome to Speak English Every Day, the podcast where you learn real, practical English through simple, natural conversations. This is the place where grammar becomes easier, vocabulary becomes useful, and speaking becomes more comfortable. Our goal is not to make you memorize long lists of rules. Our goal is to help you understand how English works in real life, at home, at work, at school, and in everyday situations. So wherever you are right now, maybe you're walking, driving, cooking, or relaxing, this is your moment to practice English in a calm, friendly, and natural way.
That's right. Here at Speak English Every Day, we believe that learning English should feel like a conversation, not a test. Many learners spend years studying grammar books, but when it's time to speak, they feel nervous and unsure. That's because real communication is not about perfect sentences. It's about expressing ideas, sharing experiences, and connecting with people. And that's exactly what we practice in this podcast. Every episode focuses on real-life language you can actually use, not just theory or complicated explanations. Before we talk about the grammar, let's first understand the idea behind the word habit. A habit is something you do regularly, something that repeats in your life. It's not a special event or a one-time action. It's something that becomes part of your routine. For example, if you drink coffee every morning, that's a habit. If you check your phone before going to bed, that's a habit. Habits are the small actions that shape your day, and over time, they shape your life. When we talk about habits in English, we are talking about these repeated actions that feel normal and familiar.
Exactly. Think about your own day. You probably wake up at a similar time every morning. Maybe you brush your teeth, take a shower, or eat breakfast. Perhaps you check your messages, go to work, study, or take the bus. These are not special events. They're part of your daily rhythm. And when we talk about habits in English, we usually talk about things that happen often, things that feel routine. They can be daily habits, like exercising or reading, or weekly habits, like visiting family or watching a favorite show.
Habits can also describe your personality and lifestyle. For example, someone might say, "I always wake up early," or "I usually work late," or "I never drink soda." These sentences don't talk about one day. They talk about patterns in your life. They show what is normal for you. And that's why habits are such an important topic in conversations. When people want to know you better, they often ask about your habits because habits reveal who you are and how you live.
And here's something important to remember. Habits are not only about daily routines. They can also be about preferences and tendencies. For example, someone might say, I usually listen to music while I work, or I often forget my keys, or I sometimes skip breakfast. These are not fixed schedules, but they still describe repeated behavior. They show what a person tends to do most of the time. So habits can be regular actions, preferences, or repeated patterns. Now that we understand what habits are, let's talk about the basic structure we use to describe them in English. The good news is that this part is very simple. When we talk about habits, we usually use the present simple tense. This tense helps us describe things that are true most of the time, things that repeat in our lives. The basic structure is easy, subject plus base verb. For example, I wake up early, I drink coffee, or I study English every day. These sentences are short, clear, and natural, and you'll hear them all the time in everyday conversations.
Yes, and one of the reasons this structure is so important is because it's the foundation of daily communication. When people talk about their routines, they rarely use complicated grammar. They use simple, direct sentences. For example, someone might say, I work from home, I take the bus, or I cook dinner at night. Notice how these sentences follow the same pattern. Subject, then verb.
But there is one small detail we need to pay attention to. When we talk about he, she, or it, the verb usually changes a little. We add an s at the end of the verb. For example, we say, I wake up at 7, but she wakes up at 7. Or, I drink tea, but he drinks tea. This small change is very important in English. It tells the listener who we're talking about, and it keeps the sentence grammatically correct.
Let's look at a few more examples to make this clear. You can say, I play soccer on weekends. But for another person, you would say, he plays soccer on weekends. Or, I watch TV at night, becomes, she watches TV at night. So the rule is simple. With I, you, we, and they, we use the base verb. But with he, she, and it, we add that small s at the end. It's a tiny change, but it appears in almost every conversation about habits.
Now, let's talk about negative sentences. What if you want to say that something is not your habit? For that, we use do not or the short form don't. The structure becomes subject plus don't plus base verb. For example, I don't drink coffee, or I don't watch TV during the week. These sentences are very common because we often talk about the things we avoid or the habits we don't have.
And just like with positive sentences, there is a small change for he, she, and it. Instead of don't, we use doesn't. For example, he doesn't drink coffee, or she doesn't wake up early. Notice something very important here. After doesn't, the verb goes back to the base form. We say, she doesn't wake up early, not she doesn't wakes up early. So remember this simple logic. Doesn't already carries the s, so the verb stays simple.
So if we look at the full picture, we have three main structures. First, the positive form, I study every day, or she studies every day. Second, the negative form, I don't study at night, or he doesn't study at night. And third, the question form, which we'll talk about in the next section. But for now, just remember this, when you talk about habits, the present simple is your best friend.
Exactly. You don't need complicated grammar to talk about your daily life. Just remember the basic structure. Subject plus base verb with that small s for he, she, and it. With this simple pattern, you can describe almost any habit. Your morning routine, your eating habits, your study schedule, or your weekend activities. Now that we understand the basic structure for talking about habits, it's time to add something very important. Adverbs of frequency. These small words help us describe how often we do something. Without them, our sentences can feel a little flat or incomplete. For example, if you just say, "I drink coffee," it tells us what you do, but not how often. Do you drink coffee every day? Once a week? Only on weekends? This is where adverbs of frequency come in.
Exactly. Adverbs of frequency are words like always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, and never. These words create a kind of scale from 100% of the time to 0% of the time. For example, always means something happens every time. Usually means most of the time. Often means many times, but not always. Sometimes means only occasionally. Rarely means almost never. And never means 0 times. So, when you use these words, you give a clear picture of your habits.
Let's look at a simple example. Imagine two people talking about breakfast. One person says, "I eat breakfast." That's okay, but it sounds a bit general. Another person says, "I usually eat breakfast at 7 a.m. That sentence feels more natural and more complete. Or someone might say, "I never eat breakfast because I wake up late." Now we understand their routine much better. The adverb gives us context, and context makes communication easier.
Now let's talk about where these words go in a sentence, because this is something many learners worry about. The good news is that the rule is very simple. In most cases, the adverb of frequency goes before the main verb. For example, "I always drink coffee," "she usually wakes up early," or "they often study at night." Notice how the adverb comes right before the action. This is the natural position in English.
But there is one small exception, and it's very important. When we use the verb to be, the adverb comes after the verb. For example, we don't say, "I always am tired." Instead, we say, "I am always tired." Or, "She is usually late," and "they are often busy." So the rule is simple. Before the main verb, but after the verb to be. Once you remember this, your sentences will sound much more natural.
Let's build a few examples together so our listeners can really feel the rhythm of these words. You can say, "I always study English in the morning," or "I sometimes watch movies in English." Maybe your friend says, "I rarely read books," or "I never drink soda." Each of these sentences paints a different picture of a person's habits. And notice how easy they are to say once you understand the structure.
These adverbs are also very useful in conversations because they help you respond naturally. For example, someone might ask, "Do you exercise?" You can answer, "Yes, I usually exercise 3 times a week," or "I sometimes go to the gym," or even, "I never exercise because I'm too busy." These answers sound much more natural than just saying yes or no. They give the listener more information and keep the conversation flowing.
Now that we've learned the basic structure and the adverbs of frequency, let's move into something more natural, a real conversation about habits. Because in real life, people don't talk about grammar rules. They just talk about their routines, their preferences, and the little things they do every day. So imagine this, it's a normal morning, 2 friends are having coffee, and they start talking about their daily habits.
Exactly. When we talk about habits in real life, the sentences are usually short and relaxed. For example, someone might say, "I usually wake up around 7, or "I always check my phone before breakfast." These aren't complicated sentences, but they carry a lot of meaning. They tell us how a person lives, what their priorities are, and what their day looks like. Habits are personal, so when we talk about them, conversations start to feel more authentic and friendly.
Let's imagine a simple exchange. I might say, I usually drink coffee in the morning, but I sometimes switch to tea. That shows a regular habit and a small variation. Then you might respond, oh, I never drink coffee. I always drink green tea. Now we're not just talking about beverages, we're sharing pieces of our lifestyle. These small details help people connect and understand each other better.
Right. And if I continue the conversation, I might say something like, I usually work out after work, but I rarely go to the gym in the morning. That sentence uses two adverbs of frequency and still sounds very natural. Or I could say, on weekends, I often sleep late and cook a big breakfast. These kinds of sentences appear constantly in everyday English because people love talking about what they do regularly.
Let me add another example. I might say, I always listen to music when I'm cooking, and I sometimes try new recipes on Sundays. That sentence gives a clear picture of my habits and even my personality. Maybe I enjoy relaxing at home or experimenting in the kitchen. Habits are not just actions, they tell a story about who we are and how we spend our time.
And the best part is that these conversations are easy to continue. I might ask, do you usually cook at home or eat out? That question invites you to share more. And you could answer, I usually cook at home during the week, but I often eat out on weekends. See how the adverbs of frequency help make the conversation smoother and more detailed?
Yes, and this is why talking about habits is such a great way to practice English. The vocabulary is simple, the grammar is predictable, and the topics are familiar to everyone. You can talk about your morning routine, your eating habits, your study schedule, or even your weekend plans. For example, you could say, I usually study English at night, or I sometimes watch English videos before bed.
Now that we've talked about how to describe habits in a natural way, let's focus on something very important. Common mistakes. Because when learners talk about their daily routines, the problem is usually not vocabulary. Most students know words like eat, go, work, study, and sleep. The real problem appears when they try to put those words into sentences. They start mixing structures, translating directly from their first language, or adding unnecessary words. And suddenly, a simple sentence becomes confusing or unnatural.
Yes, and this is completely normal. Every language has its own rhythm and logic. So when learners try to build English sentences using the structure of their native language, mistakes happen. But the good news is this, most habit-related mistakes come from just a few small problems. Once you understand those, your sentences become much clearer and more natural.
Let's start with a very common one. Many learners say something like, I am go to work every day. This sentence mixes two different structures. The learner is trying to use the present simple and the present continuous at the same time. But when we talk about habits, we use the present simple. So the correct sentence is, I go to work every day. No extra words, just the subject and the verb.
Exactly. Another very common mistake happens with adverbs of frequency. Some learners say, I drink always coffee in the morning. The words are correct, but the order is not natural. In English, the adverb usually comes before the main verb. So the correct sentence is, I always drink coffee in the morning. This small change makes the sentence sound much more natural.
Here's another example. Learners sometimes forget the S with he, she, or it. For example, they say, she usually wake up at 6, or he always drink coffee. These sentences are understandable, but they are not correct. When we talk about habits with he, she, or it, the verb changes slightly. So we say, she usually wakes up at 6, and he always drinks coffee. It's a small sound, but it makes a big difference.
Yes, and there's another mistake that appears very often. Some learners add do in sentences where it doesn't belong. For example, they say, I do wake up at 7 every day. This structure is only used for emphasis, not for normal statements. In everyday speech, we simply say, I wake up at 7 every day. Short, clear, and natural.
Another confusion happens with the verb to be. Some learners say, I am usually go to the gym, or she is always study at night. This happens because they think every English sentence needs am, is, or are. But when we talk about habits, we usually don't use to be unless we're describing a state. So we say, I usually go to the gym, and she always studies at night.
And one more important point, learners sometimes overthink their sentences. They stop in the middle and try to remember every grammar rule. But habits are one of the simplest things to talk about in English. Most of the time, all you need is subject plus base verb, plus an adverb of frequency if you want more detail. For example, I sometimes read before bed, or they usually eat lunch at noon. That's it. Simple and effective. Let's move into something a little different now, a short, simple story about habits. Because stories help us remember language more easily. When you hear grammar inside a real situation, your brain understands it faster and more naturally. So imagine a normal person with a normal life. No complicated vocabulary, no dramatic events, just everyday habits that many listeners will recognize.
Let's talk about a man named Daniel. Daniel lives in a small apartment near his office. He has a very regular routine, and he likes structure in his day. Every morning, he wakes up at 6:30. He usually stretches for a few minutes before getting out of bed. Then he makes a cup of coffee and sits by the window while the city slowly wakes up. He always checks the weather and reads a few headlines on his phone.
After that, Daniel takes a quick shower and gets dressed for work. He usually leaves his apartment around 7:30. Most days, he takes the bus, but sometimes he walks if the weather is nice. He often listens to podcasts during his commute because he likes learning new things while he travels. He rarely checks social media in the morning because he prefers to start the day calmly.
At work, Daniel has another set of habits. He always arrives a few minutes early. He likes to organize his desk and review his schedule before the day begins. He usually drinks another cup of coffee around 10 a.m. and checks his emails. He often eats lunch at the same small cafe near his office because he likes the quiet atmosphere there.
In the afternoon, Daniel focuses on his tasks. He usually finishes work around 5:30. After work, he sometimes goes to the gym, especially on Mondays and Wednesdays. On other days, he just walks home and listens to music. He rarely works late because he believes balance is important.
In the evening, Daniel has a relaxing routine. He usually cooks a simple dinner at home. He often watches a short video or reads a book while he eats. After dinner, he sometimes calls his sister or chats with friends online. He always prepares his clothes and his bag for the next day before going to bed.
Before sleeping, Daniel has one last habit. He usually reads for about 20 minutes. He says it helps him relax and forget about work. He almost never uses his phone in bed because he wants to sleep better. Around 10:30, he turns off the lights and goes to sleep.
So, what did we hear in this story? We heard many sentences about habits. He wakes up at 6:30, he usually stretches, he often listens to podcasts, he rarely checks social media. These are all simple, natural sentences using the present simple and adverbs of frequency.
Exactly. And this is how English sounds in real life. People don't use complicated grammar when they talk about their routines. They use short, clear sentences to describe what they usually do. Now, think about your own life. Do you wake up early or late? Do you always drink coffee, or do you sometimes skip it? Do you often exercise, or do you rarely go to the gym?
Try to create your own mini-story, just like Daniel's. Talk about your morning, your work or school routine, and your evening habits. Use simple sentences and adverbs of frequency. For example, I usually wake up at 7. I often drink tea. I sometimes study English at night. These small sentences are the foundation of fluent English.
And that brings us to the end of today's lesson about habits. We covered so much: how to talk about daily routines, how to use adverbs of frequency correctly, common mistakes, and even a short story to see habits in action. I hope you can see now how simple it is to describe your life in English when you focus on small, natural sentences. It's all about practice, not perfection.
Exactly, Sarah. And remember, the more you practice talking about your real-life habits, the more confident you'll become. Don't worry if you make mistakes. That's completely normal. Every error is a step closer to speaking fluently. The key is to speak every day, even if it's just a few sentences. That's how English starts to feel natural in your life. And don't forget to like this video if you found it useful. Every like tells us that you want more lessons like this and helps our community grow. Plus, hitting the like button motivates us to make even better lessons for you. It's a small action, but it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Speak English Every Day. By subscribing, you'll get more fun, practical, and real-life English lessons every week. Don't miss out on learning English naturally and confidently. It's easier than you think when you practice every day. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and slowly but surely, English will become a natural part of your life. We can't wait to see your sentences in the comments, so go ahead and share them.
That's right. And we'll see you in the next lesson, where we'll explore another essential English topic in a fun and easy way. Until then, keep speaking, keep learning, and remember, you can improve a little every single day. Bye for now.